If you haven't seen it, The Chronology of Water is Kristen Stewart's directorial feature film debut based on Lydia Yuknovich's memoir of the same name. It's a solid film, but what stood out to me most was the editing, particularly in the first half of the film. The narrative flow takes a kind of stream of consciousness approach whereby significant moments burned into her mind surface like bubbles. We do move forward in time, but certain sequences spill us into a certain feeling or an undefined place and time. This lends itself to this incredibly personal and singular depiction of Lydia's experience, as if we're witnessing her unconscious mind's memory of these events in her past, like someone older trying to make sense of their childhood. And of course, this highlights the fact that this is the film depiction of a memoir and not an autobiography, which is something I might imagine the editor Olivia Neergaard-Holm had in mind when taking this approach with Kristen Stewart. So we initially receive a more subjective experience rather than a clear vision of the events. I can't think of a more appropriate way to use the medium of film to portray traumatic childhood experiences, to radically lean into the personal experience rather than to try to depict it in some objective way, thereby avoiding a cold recounting of the experience and acknowledging that a human being lived through this. And yet the film doesn't sugarcoat her life in a way that justifies her actions later in the film. It doesn't omit the negative impact that she sometimes had on the people in her life. I think this is partly due to the narrative shift later in the film that presents Lydia's story in a more conventional and autobiographical way. Of course, there are still some sequences that pull us back into her personal experience, but overall it becomes more objective. I'm not yet sure exactly what the narrative shift signifies. I assume it's the nature of these early traumatic memories that mean they're more difficult to access and therefore less defined, or at least that's my interpretation. And I see the narrative functionality of the subjective versus objective approaches to the story, but I would have liked there to have been more of her unique way of experiencing and processing things later in the film, because it felt to me like the film was losing her personal perspective that we lived in during the beginning of the film, like as if we exited her headspace. I still think it was a great film that approached trauma in a very appropriate experiential way, and I would highly recommend it.